Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tennessee Fats, and today we're doing another Robert E. Howard Battle Royale. Now this is number 8 in our series, and what we're going to be doing in this series is I'll take a story out of this. This is my collection of all the original Robert E. Howard stories that were published in his lifetime and written in his lifetime by him. And I'm going to say, here's what happened in the story. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 different comic versions of that same story. And I'm going to say, well, here's the good points and here's the bad points for each one of these different interpretations of the story. And then I'm going to declare one of them to be a winner, as far as adherence to the original story goes. The idea of me doing this is at the end of the entire series, you're going to have a list of every single story that, in my opinion, is the best version of Robert E. Howard's work, or at least what he wanted it to say. That way, when you go out to buy your Conan books, you're buying the ones that actually match what Robert E. Howard wanted, as opposed to some adaptations, which, quite frankly put, at times are somewhat questionable. So as you probably would have guessed from what I held up earlier, today we're going to be doing The People of the Black Circle. I'm going to be comparing the Savage Sword of Conan version, which was published in 1977, with the Sumerians version of it, which I believe was published in 2021. Could be wrong on that, but I think it was 2021. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, here's the good points and here's the bad points. Now, People of the Black Circle was a very long Robert E. Howard story. And it was like an ogre or an onion in that it had layers on layers on layers on layers in that story. It was very complex. So I started this one off already very skeptical because I thought any comic version of this is going to be somewhat abridged at best. Well, let's get into the books and we'll find out what actually happened. And we're back. Now, as always, 100% of the time in these videos, what I do right here is the obligatory YouTubing. If you like Robert E. Howard content, if you like what I'm putting up here, by all means, thumbs up the video, all right? Make a comment below. I'm doing a lot of small changes to this video that I haven't done previously. Let me know if you notice them. I'll let you know if you're right. And by all means, subscribe to the channel. It's interesting. I am having a lot of fun watching the numbers actually increase on this. I'm getting a lot of people who are picking up what I'm laying down. That is very rewarding in and of itself. Now, YouTubing out of the way, this is what we're talking about. People of the Black Circle. I gotta tell you, I spent a lot of time trying to think about how I could make this story succinct. How could I actually give you guys a short snapshot of what happens in this story? This story is so complex. Honestly, this is one of the ones where you step back and you go, what was he thinking? And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying this in a positive way. What seriously was Robert E. Howard thinking in this story? This particular one. A lot of his stories seem to follow sort of a formulaic motif, let's put it that way. Conan's out there, something bad happens, sorcery's involved, he rescues the girl, kills a bunch of sorcerers, leaves. Listen, you could argue with that all sorts of different ways. Oftentimes there's character development that happens along the way, there's all sorts of, back and forth dialogue, there's political intrigue. But at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that it's something similar to that. This one, however, was I don't know, it was a thing. I'm not going to waste 25 minutes giving you the Cole's notes of this is what happened in this subplot, this is what happened in this subplot, this is what happened in this subplot, because there's a lot. I tell you, over here I got my little notes written down in my little notebook here, because when I was reading this I was making notes just so I could follow what the heck was going on, because there are a lot of names in here actually that are somewhat blurred if you don't take the time to pay attention and go, wait a minute, who is that guy? So just in general plots, I made a note of 10 different subplots within this story. That's a lot to follow. So we're not going to go into that. We're just not, okay? Because that's just going to make for a long, involved, long-winded, me losing my voice trying to give you a complete description of everything that happened. Bottom line here is, let's just take Cole's notes here, okay? King of a certain kingdom is killed. Done. Set that aside. His sister takes over, she's the princess. Done. Set that aside. This is all just context setting, okay? Conan's leading a group of raiders that are attacking this particular kingdom, just picking away at them, like raiders typically do. And 7 of his guys have been, his head men, have been taken captive by this kingdom, okay? What happens is, Princess decides that she's going to use Conan to exact her revenge against the people who killed her brother. Those people just happen to be sorcerers. Done. Now, what throws a lot of mud in the water on this one is that 2 of the people within this story that so far have been supporting characters both go off on their own to try to build their own empires and double cross everybody. So what you have in this is literally at any given point in time, not one main villain, which you would think would be, okay, well, I guess the main villain here is, you know, the leader of the sorcerers and the bad guy. But you have two, because his apprentice is actually double-crossing everybody, and he comes up as a fairly bad guy with his mistress. You have this spy guy who's hanging out that you think is going to be a bad guy, but at the end of the day turns into be one of actually the supporting characters that actually helps Conan at the end of the day. And end of day, there's the princess in this one, which I think was Robert E. Howard's attempt at actually building a stronger female character within one of his written stories. And the reason I said is because there was a lot of dialogue in this one, and typically where Robert E. Howard would end the story was, okay, lead sorcerer guy is dead, Conan rides off into the sunset, girl on saddle, everybody's fine. Well, no, what happens at this one is there's more intrigue at the end where Conan and Princess actually end up having some dialogue in tete-a-tete about what to do. And Princess and Conan actually save one another's interests and actually save 350 of Conan's raiders and thwart an invading kingdom by working together, at which point in time the princess rides back to her kingdom. Conan gets no reward or ransom for kidnapping or rescuing her, in fact, from the bad sorcerers, even though he did, in the end of the day, kill the sorcerers. That was what she wanted. And that's how the story really ends. Now, and I know, you would listen to what I just said, and you would say, okay, well, hold on, Tennessee Fats, that sounds complex and convoluted as it was. That's the simplest way I could possibly explain this story. It was out there. This was a big one. And, you know, 2 points for Robert E. Howard for working on that one and the efforts he was making, but it was complex. Just leave it at that. All right, so you've got a quick synopsis on that one. You know what happens. Princess, Conan, dead sorcerer, done. Okay, Savage Sword of Conan version. So here's the one book I do have. All right, this is the part 2. When Savage Sword of Conan pumped this story out, they pumped it out in 4 issues. So that was issues 16, 17, 18, and 19. 1977, John Buscema art throughout, and I believe it was Roy Thomas as the writer. And I'll tell you, again, I'm trying to keep this one brief for you guys, in that you got 4 issues of Savage Sword of Conan. Now that should say something. So let's take a moment here. Take a minute here, all right? Bring it over the Savage Sword of Conan, because I only unfortunately have the 1 issue that's the actual hard copy. What I have that we're reading this one in is actually in, hold on, here we go, in this. This is my volume 2 of Savage Sword of Conan, the collection editions. Here. There, see this? Do you see this? This is the equivalent of 4 issues of Savage Sword of Conan. That is a lot of content. That's a lot. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you that happened in this, all right? Marvel did a bang-up job. Period. Done. I could get into all the details on this. I've already given you the brief notes. The problem is, if I do, you're going to start getting into all the plots, the subplots, the plots of the subplots, the subplots of the subplots. Then at the end of the day, you're going to say to me, Tennessee Fats, none of this makes any sense. And you know what? Unless you read the story from beginning to end, it's not going to make sense. Because, you know, this book right over here, this is my original copy. I got my hands on this when I was a teenager, okay? I read that as a teenager. And reading that as a teenager, I can tell you, I had no effing clue what the hell was going on. So here I am as an adult, finally reading People of the Black Circle, the actual written version, the Robert E. Howard version. And now I've got all the collection here, and I'm putting it together. I'm like, oh, that's what was going on. You're right. It legitimately does a great job. It follows exactly the plot. It follows the story to the T. Marvel did a bang-up job with this. Now, I'll tell you, let's take a step back here. What are my 1 or 2 comments that I can make about this? Honestly, it gets to nitpicking. It really is nitpicking at this point in time, because you're saying to yourself, well, it's bang on. Bang on. There's literally 1 typo. Well, hold on, I'll show you guys. There was a typo on the top of page, right here, where it says, you know, the man at the top shows no strange from having just hauled the full-grown woman up the 40-foot wall. It's obviously no strain. Strain. That's nitpicking. It's nitpicking. The only other thing that I thought was kind of weird in this one is suddenly the production quality between issues, I believe it's 17 and 18? Yeah, so 17 and 18, like this is classic John Buscema art here. And suddenly the production changes where it's much more scratchy. It's the actual, like the production is literally lower. The quality of this particular issue of Savage Sword for some reason, Savage Sword, I don't know what the hell's going with that, is just way off. And it's funny because when you get back to issue number 19, it just swaps right back to your regular production, and there's no issue to it. It's just, the blurriness is completely gone. Honestly, it's nitpicking. It really is. This was a bang-up job. Marvel hit it, and then it hit every aspect of it. And this is the only other thing that I would say within this was kind of off, is that I believe it was page 280. You see these guys actually have hands up here, and for some reason here they've got these tentacle things on their arms. I don't understand why that was there, because these tentacle things on their arms was not in the written version at all. I don't get that. I honestly don't get it. It's just a weird nuance. And quite frankly, the other thing that I really like about this is Conan, once again, really leery of snakes. He spends a lot of time just, killing snakes. It's kind of a funny thing. Like here's a snake door handle, and this one in the written version as well. He decides to cut it off instead of touching it. He says, no, wait, that's a trap. That thing's going to come to life. It's going to bite me, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he's over here and he's at an altar where he's got to smash a crystal ball thing. Yeah, this crystal ball thing right here. And he's like, okay, I'm going to smash this crystal ball thing. And as he's smashing it, the snakes come to life and he kills the snakes again. And of course, in typical Conan fashion, whenever he's fighting the bad guy, they invariably turn into a giant snake. Honestly, at this point in time in Conan's career, he's got to be the world's leading expert on killing giant snakes. He just seems to do it with ease at this point in time because he's constantly killing giant snakes. Weird. It's just, I don't know what that is. It's did Robert E. Howard have a thing against snakes? Like he grew up in Texas. Maybe he did. I don't know. Savage Sword of Conan. That's it. Thumbs up. I give that one a good job. It gets a pass. Now, the Ablaze versions. Let's take a moment here and just take a look at what we got. So, here's a nice homage cover of issue number 1. And there's another cover for issue number 1. And here's another cover for issue number 1. Oh, by the way, just in case you're curious, here's another cover of issue number 1. And, it might as well, let's just throw in another cover of issue number 1. And then, another cover of issue number 1. Ablaze likes different covers. This is a thing, and I gotta tell you, I do have a lot of Ablaze comics. I got a lot of these books, and I got a lot of the different covers. Oh, by the way, just in case you're curious, there's another one. I don't know why I did that. I have this thing where I buy all things Conan, and I'm cool with that. I know who I am. I know what I do. And when I buy these, I oftentimes have to step back and say to myself, why? Really, I like the art. Check out number 2. Like, this isn't even a variant cover. This looks very much like Wonder Woman. That's pretty cool. Oh, and here's an homage cover. I believe this is number 3. Yeah, of the finale. From, I think it's an Incredible Hulk homage. Really nice. I like the covers. I like the stuff they do. I like the production quality. Like, this is the hardcover. Nice looking book. And honestly, well done. I have no issues with this. Where things start to go sour for me, and this is a thing. This is a real thing. Is that they go sour in the actual story for me on this one. How do I put this politely? I don't know if there is a way to put this politely. I don't know what Ablaze was thinking when they did this. I honestly don't. Bear in mind, Ablaze is in North America at least, is a translation of European versions of these books. I believe these were published in French, based on the fact that I'm seeing French names like Mère de Veillette. These are French. So, Océan. Île de les Géants Noirs, Island of the Black Giants. It's a thing. So, these aren't being published in English in the first place. I'm going to come back to why that's important in a second. But the other thing I can't really figure out what they were thinking is on this one is when they publish these hardcovers, what Ablaze does is they put the actual written version, the story, in the book. It's right here. So you can read the written story. And they do that, I guess, because they're saying, listen, if you want to read the original, go for it and have a good time. So having the original story right there would sort of infer to you, well, hold on, if you know the original story, it's right there, you'd stick to it, right? And thus far, I've found they've done this. If you watch the other videos, you will see there are videos where I've said, no, Ablaze wins this one. This is off. Just start with that. This is just off. They start off with a story here explaining how Conan's 7 people got kidnapped, making it sound like it was a planned attack, which it was not in the written version. That was kind of odd. Basically, you start going, and honestly, the king getting sick and then the sister killing, that was okay. But then it starts to go south as soon as you get to the point where this Devi Yasmina, the princess, is relaying her plans of what she's going to do when she's at this outpost with this governor. And Conan apparently was there the whole time, heard the whole plan. kills a whole bunch of people in the room that weren't there. And this is where things start to get a little bit more offbeat for me. It's just, I don't, like, the dialogue doesn't match. It honestly doesn't. Like, I'll be the one that will turn you into a vile liar. That dialogue right there had absolutely nothing to do with any of the rest of the story. I don't understand that. And it's interesting because I think this is really where a translation issue has honestly got in and cut back. Like right here, he's clearly choking this person out to knock them, because he knocks them unconscious and then kidnaps them. Later on, they say, "You hit me." Well, he didn't. Another issue that I thought was kind of funny in here is, where was the word "cannot"? I don't know if we can find it really easily right now, but the word "cannot," every time you see it written out in here, the second end is backwards. That seems strange to me. And where was the panel where it was? Yeah, right here. I'm going to bring this one up for you to take a close look at it. This panel is cut. It's off. It's offset. It doesn't have the same borders as everything else. And this is where it gets to a production quality inside the book, where I'm like, well, hold on. So you've done this great job in building basically what looks like a very good book. You've done all these great covers. But on the inside on this one, you're starting the story off. Like, it's not following. And it gets worse. As things go along, you find more and more deviations to the point where I'm just not seeing it. I'm really not. The murder of these 7 guys, or the execution, that didn't make sense to me. I'm like, no, that wasn't what happened. Conan kills 2 of these tribespeople up in the hills after they kill the horse. That didn't happen. The way that the sorcerer turns the hill people against Conan with all this green sorcery, that never happened. When Conan escapes, he apparently trounces the guy down with his horse. Well, the guy's right there. He never gets trounced down with his horse. That just didn't happen. Conan didn't go out the back door through a secret exit. He rode right through them. That didn't happen. And I could keep going with that didn't happen, but at the end of the day in this one, the story of, okay, at the princess ends up getting kidnapped by this bad sorcerer guy, that does happen. How she gets there, slightly off. How they get rescued, completely off. And the end with the dialogue where I mentioned earlier, where they said, they tried to do a good job of, building this, or Robert E. Howard did, a good job of building this strong female character, and how they had this sort of tete-a-tete at the end. Well, that's included in there, but you've lost me along the way. It's just off. I don't know what the writer was going for in this. I don't know why they summarized this. They clearly included the original story, and so thus far, Ablaze has done a really good job of staying close to the original story. But on this one, they were just off. They were off on the actual plot. They were off on the execution. And then the translation, when it comes through to you, it's choppy. In English, reading this as an Anglophone, it's choppy. With my parents being Francophones, I know a fair amount of French. I'm trying to figure out the structure of how this sentence originally worked. And I'm like, okay, I think I know what they were trying to say here. But it's off. It's just off. And to me, that just... a nice story, if you're reading this in absentia of knowing what the original Robert E. Howard story was, it's good. It catches your attention. But the other thing that throws me off on this one is the art in this just looks manga-like to me. It really does. Conan to me looks like he belongs in some sort of manga or on some sort of, I don't know, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure type story. It just doesn't read to me. To me, this does not scream, okay, this is a Conan story. And, it's a different take on it. I'm glad they did their artistic interpretation. For them, it makes sense. I'm not going to comment on the art too much. To me, this doesn't really sing. But, is a standalone story not knowing the original story, or as a standalone story not knowing the original story, this was good. I would say this is a nice standalone story of 3 issues. Adherence to the original Robert E. Howard? No. And it could be that they were chopping it back because they were concerned with, the idea of we only have so many pages. Maybe that's what it was. As I mentioned, Marvel did this in 4 issues of that Savage Sword. Ablaze did this in 3 issues of a comic that's only that thick. That's pretty thin. I could see what they were going for. I could see the constraints they had. But this could have been done in a lot of different ways. Now, I'll tell you what was really good in this, though. And it comes back here. This dialogue right here. In the story, the Robert E. Howard story, he made a big deal about how these 2, who had their own subplot, they were trying to stab everybody in the back, developed what they were doing. And the inner turmoil that this guy went through. Marvel sort of glossed over it. Ablaze really did it. Really did it. They showed this turmoil going through him to the point where over he says, yes, we will do this. I concur. Let's go ahead with this. Ablaze did a good job on that. Marvel, I think, missed that a little bit. That's one thing I will say Ablaze did win on this one. But for the rest of it, they were, I don't know. To me, they just didn't follow the story. Good story in and of itself. Not so good when you're saying, let's compare this to the Robert E. Howard. So I think you can see where this one is going. Because when I'm stepping back in these video series and I'm saying the goal here is I'm going to give you a complete list of what do I think of these as we go. Specifically as to how do they adhere to the original Robert E. Howard. Well, this doesn't. It's great. It hits it at the end where you get a couple little aspects of the original story. But the execution just isn't there. So I think it's fairly obvious. Let's get to conclusion time here, shall we? Which one wins this one out? Which one of these I think wins at the end of the day? Well, yeah. Marvel hit this one out of the park. Savage Sword of Conan, bang. This wins hands down 100% of the way. As far as this hits the original Robert E. Howard content, the art's good, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to knock one or the other for the art because everybody has their own artistic interpretation of what they want to see when they're reading a comic book. But as far as story-wise goes, this hits it. This really nails what Robert E. Howard had in the original intent. The only falling short was that it was just a little too brief in the inner turmoil of that one guy that was turned to come up with his own plan. Yeah, other interesting things that I observed in this. Well, obviously, I don't understand the thing with Conan and snakes. I don't understand why Robert E. Howard is doing the same with snakes. Every time Conan is killing snakes. Great, he's like Indiana Jones the Barbarians. That's fantastic. A weird comment came out of this, and it rung through in both versions. And the comment was with regards to, I have eaten his salt. And I'll show you where it is here. When the guy I was talking about where I said, no, they didn't do enough work in developing him. That's the guy I'm talking about here. Right here. You see, the mistress is trying to get him to kill this guy who's a double agent for a nearby kingdom. He says, no, I've eaten his salt. Besides, he cannot interfere with us. Well, that was in the Marvel version. It was in Robert E. Howard's version as well. And it's actually in the Ablaze version as well. It's interesting that this one comment, remember some of you might remember me making this comment in another video where I said what seems to be the case is when the authors don't really know what the phrase means and when they're editing and they don't know if it can be cut or not, they leave it in. I believe on the other one, it was actually a very rude biblical joke. In this case, it's again saying, no, I've eaten his salt. Where are we at here? No, I have eaten his salt. They leave it in. They leave it in here as well. It's interesting to see that one phrase when so many things are getting cut get left in. So I stepped back and I said, well, what the heck does I have eaten his salt mean? Because I've never heard that idiom before in my life. Apparently it's an idiom that just means I have been a guest in his home. Interesting that this guy that's willing to go out there and murder people and use sorcery to just massacre entire tribes of people won't kill somebody just because he's been a guest in his home. Kind of interesting. That was a neat little nuance there. But at the end of the day, in summary, regardless of whether it was included in both or not, it doesn't change the fact that Marvel clearly wins this one. So the winner of this particular Robert E. Howard Battle Royale clearly goes to Marvel. Savage Sword of Conan, 1977, coming in for the win. This one takes it. So I believe our next one, I think I actually do need to find myself a copy of a Marvel Treasury Edition before I can shoot the next one of these. So the next one might be a little bit out there. So make sure you've got that subscribe and notification on. If you do, you'll get notified when we do put that video out. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next one.